Hi, this is the third of the three video series on honesty in publishing that we're doing. I'm covering only two topics. They're both much more complicated than the other topics. We're definitely going to get into the weeds here with the goal, as in all of these things, for you to recognize when you're talking to somebody who is not being honest with you about what they're offering to you. The first of the two is when a self-publishing firm is trying to act like a traditional firm. They are trying to convince you that they are a traditional publishing firm. Every author wants to be traditionally published, so it's a very attractive thing for all authors, and there are sadly many firms that try to act like they're and present themselves as traditional so that you'll buy from them. There are three main parts that I'm going to ask you to look at. The first is the website. I talked in the first video and asked you to familiarize yourself with what traditional publishing websites look like. They have a lot in common. They have a particular way of asking for submissions. They are a little standoffish because, you know, for every one that they accept, there's more than 99 that they don't accept. Many of them don't even talk to authors without an agent. And so the site can be a little standoffish, but generally they're just factual. Generally they're just factual. They're not really trying to sell you. And if you familiarize yourself with the way that traditional publishers look, you'll be able to recognize when there's a self-publishing company that is trying to look that way. It's not very complicated. Self-publishing companies charge you. Many of those sites will not tell you that they charge you until they feel like they've got you. Let's talk to the editorial staff. The editorial staff will call, can we make an appointment? This is an unusual situation. It's a lot of selling you when traditional publishers don't sell you. But you need to familiarize yourself with traditional publishers so you know what they look like, and then look through all of the different parts of it. And in the end, you know, they charge you or they don't charge you. And if they charge you, they're trying to act like a traditional publisher when they're really not, which should be a sign. I'll put it that way. There are a number of publishers that claim connection to traditional publishers, to traditional parent companies, and infer, sometimes state directly, but usually not. They infer that your distribution, and remember, distribution is where it's at. Distribution is where book sales are going to occur. It's absolutely one of the two, maybe three areas that just absolutely has to be. HarperCollins Christian Publishing has the biggest, strongest Christian book publishing distribution list in the world, and they gross $435 million in book sales because of it. So there are firms that try to attach themselves to names, to HarperCollins, to Simon & Schuster, and they infer that the distribution is done by the traditional. You can see we've put up on the board here, you can ask them, and you should ask them, and ask them to go into detail on the phone, but then write a very simple email that is very specific about whether or not the company that they are associated with is doing any of their operations, and whether or not is their distribution list, and ask them to go into detail. The fact of the matter is that there is a number of companies that use a traditional publisher, a well-known name, pay them for the name, and they have absolutely nothing to do with their operations. It does not give you any advantage at all. You'll probably pay more. The second thing to watch for is when there is a known name, a Simon & Schuster, a HarperCollins, a HarperCollins Christian, whatever, and all there is the name. Okay? ask the publisher, ask the sales rep, what exactly it is that that name publisher does in terms of the operations for the sales rep's company. More importantly, ask the same question on email. I've got this up on the board. Ask the same question on email, because there are a few different self-publishing companies that are purely self-publishing. They have no advantage whatsoever over any other self-publishing company. They just pay to use the name of a big five, of a well-known publisher. Doesn't give you any advantages at all. In fact, you'll pay more for the same thing. The third thing, which is a subset of the second, is there will be claims by self-publishing companies that associate themselves, partner with, our division of, whatever it is. They'll claim that they use the distribution list of the traditional. The distribution list is a big time thing. HarperCollins Christian Publishing, we are a division of. We use all the same lists. Our distribution is the same as the distribution for Zondervan or the distribution for Thomas Nelson, but we're the only ones. There'll be 50 like us in 10 years if it works, and it's working, but we're the only one. There are many that say that they have distribution lists for you, the author, for your manuscript, that are the distribution lists of the big name. It's 500 times more powerful than a self-publishing list, so it's a really big deal. So ask them clearly, get specifics, and then ask them in email. The second of these two has to do with royalties and printing, and this does get quite complicated. You should be able to get wholesale printing, copies of your own book for 25 to, we'll say, 40% of the retail price. Okay, you should be able to have a retail price that is in the market. A 250-page book for $15, $14, $13, for instance. You should be able to enjoy healthy royalties as a function of the retail price, the suggested retail price, SRP is what it's called. Okay, you're not going to be able to have a market price, a low wholesale price, and a high royalty, but you should be able to have a market price that'll sell, not $24 for a 250-page book. You should be able to have that regardless. And of the other two, you should either be able to have quite low wholesale prices you can buy your book at, 30%, or high royalties per gross. You probably won't be able to have both, but you should have one or the other. So, as you are asking, if I have a 250-page book that's a 6x9 softcover, how much is it going to cost? What royalties I get, what percent of the retail price, because there's different formulas, and how much can I buy that for wholesale? And what you'll find is that some of these, when you ask them specific, are wanting to sell a 250-page book for $23. That $23 book, you have to pay $13 for it. So there's a huge chunk that they're keeping for themselves. Or they kind of are covert about what your royalties are in the formula, and you end up at a very low royalty. 15% of gross is not unreasonable. 20% of gross is not unreasonable for a royalty. You will hear a lot, 50% of net, right? Which is actually, and the net is a low percentage of the gross. So that's why I'm suggesting that you ask for what are the royalties as a percent of the retail price. You'll never get high royalty and super low wholesale. You should get one of those two, and they'll be in balance. If you get one really well, the other one will be maybe moderate. If you get the other one very well, the one will be moderate. But you'll see people, you'll see publishers that are asking, have a retail price that is very high, and the royalty and the wholesale price for the book for you is also very high. That's the most common thing. So, in review, now we're going to put this up on the board. We're going to put something after that on the board. I'd like you to look at all of it, okay? But here we go. Here's your checklist. You should, when you're looking at a firm, you should Google the publisher name plus complaint plus scam plus review. Okay, you should use 6 or 7 reviewers. You should probably throw out the one that makes them sound like a second coming, and you should just throw out one that is super nasty. There are reviewers that are kind of vicious and gotcha kind of style, whose main point is to get you to buy services from them. Okay, so those guys are very dangerous. If you read something great, read something else. If you read something horrible, read something else, because you'll have these kind of, they've got their own agendas, people, and you can eliminate them if you use 6 or 7 reviews. If it sounds too good to be true, if it's playing your emotions and your dreams, playing on your emotions and your dreams, it is. If the website tries to act like a traditional publisher, which all authors want, and they turn out to be a self-publisher, which you can find out because they'll charge, run away, as far as I'm concerned. Very important, always use a credit card. Always use a credit card, and do that in concert with writing them these questions that I've asked you to write that ask them for specific things, because what you're doing is you're building a written case. So that if you do end up buying from them and you realize you've been conned, you can protest, and you've got a written case for the things that they told you that they were going to do that they didn't do, because they'll avoid many of those things in the contract. Sometimes they can't put them in the contract, but if you have the written case, you're okay. Make sure that if there is a claim that the distribution is traditional, that they are very, very specific, and that you dig deep on that. There are many firms that say they have traditional distribution because they assume that they'll be able to fool you. Okay? Ours is simple. If you write to us and you say, do you have traditional distribution of HCCP? We will list the distribution. We will allow you, give you the email of the publisher within HCCP. You'll have a clear, honest answer. If you're not getting clear, honest answers that are completely, transparent, they probably don't. If they have a name associated with partners, they're partners with Simon & Schuster, partners with HarperCollins, partners with Penguin, whatever it is, find out if that company does any of their operations. Very specific. What operations does Simon & Schuster do for you? Because what you'll find is they all say that, but they are actually just a run-of-the-mill self-publishing company that are trying to attract you by having a name. There's no advantage to their brand at all over another self-publisher. Know your wholesale prices, ask questions, set metrics, $15, 250 pages, 6x9, tell me how much I'm going to pay. Put that in writing too. Compare different ones to see where that's coming. Don't expect to have the best of all three, but you should have either really good royalties or really good wholesale prices. And whatever price that they are setting retail should be, in your mind, market. Go into a bookstore and look what they cost. Don't sign on the bottom line if the written claims that you get from the sales pitch, there might be one thing, there might be 2 things, but if you continue to ask these kinds of things, you'll see patterns. Crooks don't like to answer those straight questions that are specific that you put in writing. Crooks don't like to answer those questions that you put in writing because they're crooks, and they know that it will be their downfall, so they don't do that.